And gentlemen, good afternoon. We are ready to resume our deliberations with the last plenary session of our meeting entitled Searching for Solutions, Scenarios for Jerusalem. This is probably the most important session of our conference. Up till now, we have been dealing mostly with issues that affect Israel and Palestine. Now, we are going to focus on issues that affect the world. Without a solution for Jerusalem, there will be no Israeli-Palestinian peace. Jerusalem is not just a bilateral issue, but part of our global heritage, which has deep meaning for billions worldwide, Muslims, Jews, and Christians. How well we deal with it will determine whether Jerusalem will become a city of peace and remain a perpetual apple of discord. Once all the presentations have been made, the floor will be opened for questions and comments from the audience, to which our speakers will respond. Before starting, I would like to appeal to our speakers to stay within the 15 minutes time limit set by the organizers, so that there will be enough time for discussion. The first speaker in this plenary is Mr. Hiba Husseini. Since 1994, she has been served as legal advisor to peace process negotiations. She is a founding member of Al Muscat Rabal Foundation, a non-partisan organization aimed at promoting economic development and rule of law in Palestine. I hope Ms. Husseini can enlighten us about how the issue of Jerusalem was approached in previous rounds of negotiations. Madam, we thank you for your participation in this meeting, and you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here at this conference. Thank you for the organizers, and it's a pleasure to be here in Dakar. This is my first visit here, so it's been a very short but very interesting stay so far. So I thank also the government of Senegal. I think two things I would start off with, but Mr. Chairman has put a lot of pressure on us all of a sudden. I was feeling very comfortable until now when he said this is the most important session of the plenaries. Well, in a sense, it's not that I disagree or agree. I think the issue of negotiations has been a very intractable issue, and I think Jerusalem does indeed lie at its very, very heart, not to mention that it is one of the 5 core issues. Now, we all know that the core issues include refugees, include settlements, include issues related to sovereignty, borders, and of course, Jerusalem. I think it is also fair to say that most of the core issues, while having been postponed, and since a host of other ancillary peripheral issues have arisen, unfortunately, to complicate the situation even further, and to complicate the resumption of negotiations. I think Jerusalem has not had the attention that it really deserves. And I think this raises the issue as to why. Let me also remind that the negotiations were based initially on a territorial exchange. Peace for territory, land for peace. This is where the concept of land for peace emanated from. We, the Palestinians and the Israelis, will get together to address this conflict, to end the occupation, to establish the state side by side under the guise and the principle of land for peace. So the territorial issue has been core. Jerusalem, of course, is the core of all these issues. The premise was a two-state solution with Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, capital of the state of Palestine, and of course, West Jerusalem, capital of the state of Israel. The agreements, the Declaration of Principles mention Jerusalem. It doesn't mention East-West, of course, but it is understood. The realities as such have delineated in a way a borderline of sorts that has been over the years, as we have seen from all the other presentations, I'm sure yesterday and this morning, demonstrated to you how far we have veered from the 1967 borders. That said, I think what also lies at the heart of the Jerusalem issue is the holy places and the holy sites. So this is what I will describe to you in terms of the sets of negotiations since 1993. So let me start by sharing with you the following. The discussions between the PLO and Israel, again, for the period 1993 to 99, focused on a simple mention of the fact that Jerusalem will be one of the topics for final status negotiations. It was mentioned in the Declaration of Principles, and that was it. There was an attempt during 1999 to 2000, during the, again, Arafat Barak period, to address the issue of Jerusalem. It was raised in the Stockholm discussions between Abu Ala and Shlomo Ben Ami. Then it was raised during July 2000 at Camp David. Camp David had the first substantial discussion of Jerusalem. In December 2000 to January 2001, in the discussions at Bowling in the US, we had some discussions on Jerusalem, but nothing concrete, followed by Taba discussions, and followed by the Clinton parameters on Jerusalem, which I will describe momentarily. Now, during the periods when the negotiations were obviously frozen, Jerusalem was mentioned subsequent to that in April 2003 in the roadmap. It was supposed to be part of the third phase of the roadmap. Of course, that has not materialized. Between the years 2006 to 2009, we have Abbas Olmert administrations. In Annapolis, November 2007, the statement was as follows: negotiations on all issues. For the Palestinians, that meant Jerusalem. In 2008, there was a proposal on Jerusalem. It was a Palestinian proposal, followed by Olmert's proposal during Annapolis, which I will describe also. I'm just giving you the timeline in terms of years. Between 2009 and 2013, this was the second Netanyahu government, and Abbas. All discussions were frozen, including those over Jerusalem. Between 2013 to 2014, the third Netanyahu government attempted to resume negotiations on a framework agreement. We, the Palestinians, wanted all issues to be discussed, including Jerusalem. But the issue by Netanyahu was sidelined. Now, let me share with you what it all means for the Palestinians. When we refer to East Jerusalem, we refer to the 1967 East Jerusalem. That includes the Old City, and that includes the holy sites in the Old City. We do not recognize the altered and the changes in terms of the status quo, the 1967 status quo that Israel has introduced with respect to the terminology they have introduced as well, which is the Holy Basin. The Holy Basin is a very large area. It encompasses areas beyond the walls of the old city and the holy sites within the old city. So there is a disagreement right there. We also disagree, of course, in terms, the core of the core, or the heart of the heart, is really Al-Haram al-Sharif. So for us, the Haram al-Sharif is a Muslim holy sacred site. It cannot be divided, it cannot be shared, and it cannot be altered in terms of its status. From an Israeli perspective, this is seen differently. Now, we go to the issues of the neighborhoods, because that's what the Clinton parameters, as I mentioned, focused on. The Clinton parameters discussed Jewish neighborhoods in terms of dividing, of course, the East Jerusalem. Now, we're not talking about the West. We're talking, all these discussions are about the altered status of East Jerusalem. So here we have the Clinton parameters suggesting Jewish neighborhoods under Israeli sovereignty. So the term sovereignty is being introduced with respect to Jewish neighborhoods, and Arab, not even Palestinian, Arab neighborhoods under Palestinian sovereignty. These parameters came about following Camp David discussions, as Camp David issues reached a no decision, especially on Jerusalem. So Clinton parameters brought about this proposal. There is disagreement about the concept, and there is disagreement in terms of what constitutes an Arab, i.e. Palestinian, versus a Jewish neighborhood. Who defines a Jewish neighborhood, and who defines an Arab-Palestinian neighborhood? If we were to look deeply at the proposal, we can see that it won't really work. It won't work because it isolates neighborhoods within East Jerusalem. And the maps clearly indicate that, and the neighborhoods clearly indicate that. For example, when the parameters discuss Jewish neighborhoods, they include the settlement of Ma'ali Adumim. Ma'ali Adumim is to the east, near the Jordan Valley. That whole neighborhood cuts through Jerusalem, and therefore, and then Jordan Valley, of course, and therefore it is not tangible in terms of how East Arab or Palestinian East Jerusalem would look like. And this is an example. There are so many others, like Givat Ze'ev, there's Har Humar, i.e. Jabal Abu Ghnaim, and so forth. So when the only time that there was a coherent discussion, I would say, it was during Annapolis, but it was not written. On the Jerusalem issue, we have not been able to reach a written text whereby even the principles are agreed to. So it was a lot of verbal, oral discussion, and no conclusive point of departure even on East Jerusalem. Now we get to the old city. In terms of the quarters of the old city itself. The old city is comprised of three major quarters: the Muslim quarter, the Christian quarter, and the Jewish quarter. The Christian quarter also expands to include the Armenian quarter, which makes it a fourth quarter. The location of the Armenian quarter is situated between the Jewish quarter and the Muslim, borders both, actually, the Christian and the Muslim quarter. Israel is insisting that the Armenian quarter is going to be part of Israel. that is under its sovereignty. That includes also the Wailing Wall Tunnel. I'm sure you have heard about all the infrastructure alterations that have been taking place to construct tunnels reaching the Haram al-Sharif. This also includes, in terms of what the Israeli side is asking for, the Tower of David, and of course the City of David, what they call the City of David, and even extending to outside the Old City, as I mentioned, within the parameters of what Israel defines as the Holy Basin. So, as I said, the Holy Basin is not a concept that the Palestinians recognize. It is because it's very expansive. So we differ in terms of the definitions, in terms of the status quo, in terms of what is Palestinian neighborhood, what is Jewish neighborhood, the scope, and the sovereignty related to that. We differ in terms of access, movement, and so forth. The movement and access issue has been another tangible issue where we could not find or see eye to eye on, namely that the old city should be an open city. As Palestinians, we even prefer to have Jerusalem at large to be an open city. Israel is preferring to have walls and physical borders, that is, to isolate the Arab from the Jewish neighborhoods. So all in all, it's a question of sovereignty, it's a question of the holy sites, it's a question of definitions, and that demonstrates how difficult it has been to even begin the discussions. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, we, the Palestinians, have been ready to discuss and have been actually eager to discuss. And we would like to have Jerusalem to be, and the holy sites to be at the forefront of the core issues in terms of the negotiations. But repeatedly, we have been stonewalled. We believe that the Israeli side, the Israeli government, has not been ready and has not taken the issue of Jerusalem seriously in terms of the negotiations. It always sidelines the issue. And when Jerusalem becomes more and more of an issue that is being placed on the table as a Palestinian demand, we find that Israel finds ways to excuse itself from the negotiations and says that the Palestinian side is not ready, is not reasonable, does not want to discuss. It's not that we're not ready or we don't want to discuss. What we do not want to discuss is the alteration to the 67 borders of the Old City and of Jerusalem itself. What we don't want to discuss is the access to the Haram al-Sharif. What we don't want to discuss is how Palestinian neighborhoods are going to be isolated within even the parameters of East Jerusalem itself. So again, here it's a question of point of departure, it's a question of core, it's a question of principle, and question of the holy sites as they stand from a Palestinian definition. And I will end on this point because I think I'm way beyond. What we want is, and what we insist on is to have Jerusalem a core issue, to start negotiations with Jerusalem. Any compromise that we may have in terms of territory or in terms of neighborhood, if entertained, must be entertained within the entire set of negotiated and settled agreement. We cannot agree on a piecemeal approach to Jerusalem nor the holy sites, and the position is that Al-Haram al-Sharif is a Muslim sacred holy site, not subject to division or being shared. Thank you.
I would like to thank Ms. Husseini for your presentation. Our committee has always appreciated your work. As a first-hand witness to the negotiations over the years, you have a lot of interesting information to share. The next speaker is Mr. Rami Nasrallah, who is the head of the Board of Directors of the International Peace and Cooperation Center in Jerusalem. He coordinated a team of experts preparing the final status negotiations on Jerusalem. He founded the International Peace and Cooperation Center in Jerusalem and is a research associate on the Cities in Conflict project at the Architecture Faculty of Cambridge University. He wrote extensively on divided cities. He is one of the top experts worldwide on conflict in cities, Jerusalem in particular, and what can be done about it. It is a genuine privilege to have you with us. I would like to invite everyone to ask questions afterwards so we can utilize Mr. Nasrallah's vast knowledge on the subject matter. And I would give you the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't claim that I'm an expert. That's not my CV. Actually, you quoted from, I don't know which publication, but I'm trying to be humble. So I'm learning, I'm trying to figure out and to explore different cases in different cities. It will be complementary to what Hiba talked about. And maybe I'll show some of the maps that Hiba talked about, the different proposals from Camp David into Annapolis. But first, it's important to mention the period before 2000. There was a kind of informal track to diplomacy negotiations between the Palestinians and Israelis. It took more the form of an academic experts who met to discuss the different aspects of the daily life of Jerusalem. That was the main title. It was all done under the umbrella of the Orient House. Professor Manawel Hassasian called it track 1.5 because it was well known to the officials on the Palestinian side, but on the Israeli side, unfortunately, it was still a taboo and no Israeli wanted to talk about Jerusalem. At that period, the Palestinian assumption that in order to make the Israelis relax about raising the issue of Jerusalem, so there was a concept developed by late Faisal Husseini about an open city concept. We are not talking about a physical division of Jerusalem. We talk about a one urban unit which need to function with no physical borders between East and West. That was the talks until 2000. After 2000, I will say, we will go to the map for Camp David 2000. This shifted into more an Israeli discourse of full separation. And actually this started in 93 with the closure, but it's being completed with the construction of the wall in 2001, 2002. So the Israeli mindset since 2000 is to build a physical border between Palestinians and Israelis. What the Israelis suggested in Camp David in the latest period, at the latest stage of the negotiations, was to keep the Palestinian neighborhoods within the inner belt, within the inner neighborhoods around the old city, what we can call the visual basin of the old city, under full Israeli sovereignty. And to give the Palestinian Authority areas or suburbs, neighborhoods in the north and in the south to be under Palestinian functional autonomy, kind of, but not sovereignty and not a territorial sovereign solution. The main Israeli discourse about moving from the taboo of Jerusalem, discussing the issue of Jerusalem, into the discourse how better we can serve the Israeli interest in Jerusalem. Since then, they start to talk about the trade-off, territory with demographic considerations and with a Palestinian recognition of the Jewish ties to the Al-Haram al-Sharif. That was their thinking. And in a way, we can say that the territorial demographic consideration, they were all in line with the security demand of the Israelis. The map that we see now is the Geneva Initiative, which is an official Palestinian with a non-official Israelis who discuss the issue of Jerusalem among the permanent status issues. And as we see, Palestinian accepted not all the facts on the ground, as Israelis claim all the time, but we're trying to shrink the expansion area of settlement. All these red built-up area, they are all settlements in East Jerusalem, including the Ma'ale Adumim settlement block with an access to Jerusalem, but not a territorial contiguity between the settlement and East Jerusalem. For the Old City, the Geneva Initiative, they're talking about a full separation, to construct a wall, to have a boundary and crossing from the Old City, to the Palestinian state and to the Israeli state, and to keep, as Hiba talked about, the Armenian and the Jewish quarter under full Israeli sovereignty. In Annapolis, I think there was despite the fact that there was no official minutes, but still we can draw some maps about what the Israelis propose, what the Israelis have in mind, and what the Palestinians propose. The Israelis, they kept all settlements, all expansion of settlements.